We're gonna move to our first speaker, which is Nathan Walder. Nathan is the lead teacher trainer for Macmillan Education in the MENA region with a bachelor and a master's degree in childhood and anthropology. He has more than 15 years of experience in young learner education, starting in pre-primary and primary in the UK before specializing in special education needs, SEN. He has lived and worked in multiple countries across the world with experience in teaching, teacher training, assessment, and educational development. Nathan is going to give us a presentation about culture, literacy, and creative teaching practices. The floor is all yours, Nathan.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to the Educational Webinar Jam Summit this evening. I hope you're enjoying all of the great content that we've seen so far. Hopefully I can keep up that tornado of passion and energy that we just saw in Farouz's. He was like a whirlwind of energy, so it was fantastic to see. So I'm going to move through this quite quickly because I've got quite a lot of content to cover. But if I go a bit fast, then please do feel free to slow me down. It's going to be a little bit interactive as well, hopefully. I saw people being interactive in the last ones. So hopefully you are engaging with some of this content again right now. Let's make sure we move this right up so you can see the whole screen. Perfect. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathan, as mentioned, and I am the lead teacher trainer for Macmillan Education in the Middle East and North Africa region, otherwise known as MENA. And I also set up the MENA PD Academy, which some of you may have come into contact with, and I will introduce a little bit at the end as well. My role within Macmillan Education, though, is to fulfill their ambition of advancing learning in the region that I work in. So there's me. I already got a lovely introduction from Lamia. Thank you very much, Lamia. And also thank you to Maria for inviting me to be here with you this evening. I'm going to draw a little bit on my social and cultural anthropology background within this particular presentation as well. And also I want to link a little bit academia with classroom practice. So at Macmillan, a lot of the work that I do is classroom-based, supporting teachers with students, continuous professional development. But we are actually part of Springer Nature, which is one of the world's biggest research institutions. And a big part of what I do is bringing some of that academia, bringing some of those new ideas to teachers in a more digestible way, I guess, and trying to help support them in implementing them in the classroom. Again, part of that advancing learning mission. So this evening, we're looking at cultural literacy and creative teaching practices. So I'm going to be looking at this from two angles. The first is to see where there might be some pitfalls. Part of this is remaining conscious about some of the hidden meanings and perhaps cultural stereotypes which might be embedded within our contents. And we don't always see it, we're not always conscious of it if we're focusing on other areas. So we're going to look a little bit at that, and we're going to look at opportunities as well. So both sides we're going to be looking at. How can we make the most? Not reinventing the wheel, not giving teachers extra work, but looking for opportunities to extend what we're already doing with our students to make it more meaningful for them. And hopefully along the way, just in case you're not that familiar with cultural literacy, we'll hopefully answer the question, well, what is cultural literacy as well? So I said it's going to be a little bit interactive. I need to watch the time, but we're going to do an activity. Hopefully there are some budding artists in the room. Let's see how many of you there are hanging around in here. 25 or so. Okay, good. So if you've been to the earlier ones, hopefully you've got a pen and paper or pencil and paper that you've been scribbling your little professional development notes down. So I'm going to ask you to do a very easy activity. No need to worry. We're not doing Picasso work here. We are going to be doing something called Quick Draw. And I don't know if any of you have used Google Quick Draw before. If you have, you can let me know in the chat. Give me a yes. If you're like me and you like to procrastinate while you're supposed to be making a educational webinar jam summit presentation, you can quite easily lose an hour or two using Google Quick Draw. It's great fun. But the idea is that you get one word and you have to draw it as fast as possible. It's online. It's just, you just type in Google Quick Draw. It's fun. It's actually good vocabulary practice for your students as well, if they're of a A2 kind of level. So I'm going to say a word and you have 10 seconds or as fast as you can to draw it in a representative format, just so that somebody could be like, oh yeah, that is whatever the word is. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to give you the first word. So get your pencils at the ready, and I'm going to count you down from 10 on my fingers, make it fun. So your first word is toy. 3, 2, 1. Okay, pencils down. Obviously, if you didn't have a pencil and paper, just close your eyes for 5 seconds and you can mentally draw the picture in your mind. So there, you've got the first one. First word was toy. The second word is bridge. So you've got 10 seconds. Missed a couple of seconds already. So hopefully you're all scribbling away and I'm not just talking to myself. Okay, 3, 2, 1, pencil down. Okay, that's your second word. Hopefully it's on the same piece of paper. And your third word is home. All you have to do is draw the word that I say. The first one was toy, the second one was bridge, and the third word is home. So quick draw. And that should be it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, pencils down. Hopefully you've got either in front of you a drawing or 3 drawings, or otherwise you've got a mental image, the first thing that you thought of for those 3 words. And we're going to come back to those words as we go. Okay, now when we look at these 3 words in a second, we're going to go through each one in turn. I think it's important to recognize that language and culture are deeply interconnected. We cannot teach language and not accept the cultural messages that the vocabulary that we use carries. Everything we do carries messages to our students. Even if they don't know the vocabulary that we're teaching them, all the content that we use carries a lot of cultural messages. And we're going to look at those quite carefully in the next section. So let's look at some of the words that we looked at. First one I gave you was toy. Now I wonder, did it take you a moment longer to think of the toy that you were going to draw in the first place, or the first one you were going to think of? For me, it actually took a couple of seconds. I was like, oh, what toy should I choose? And of course, I thought back, what kind of toys did I enjoy when I was a child? I chose a Lego brick in the end. I did actually do this task myself with my wife. So I came up with a Lego brick. You can put in the chat box, what things did you come up with? What did you draw? Or what did you think of? What was your toy? A ball? Okay, good. Nice and easy if you was to drawing that. A teddy bear, yeah, quite a common one, I'm sure. A toy train. So I think we can all accept that toys are incredibly cultural. They're cultural artifacts. So I don't want to dwell too much on this particular piece of vocabulary. But toys are incredibly cultural. If you want to know more about the cultural influence of toys in childhood, there's a really good photo essay that you can look up. I've put the link in the references at the end, so you can look that up later. But you can Google Toy Stories, photo exhibition, and you can find these. And there's a whole selection from all around the world. And it's really interesting, this idea of what some children see as toys. There's one particular one where the girl has got all sunglasses. She's got like 100 pairs of sunglasses, all different colors and shapes and sizes, but she considers them to be toys. So there's lots of ways that we can explore toys with students and the meaning behind them. Toys are one way that students make meaning of the world around them. I said I don't want to dwell too much on toys. I want to move on to the next one. Bridge. So I did draw the bridge earlier. So was your bridge anything like my bridge? This was my, well, I think this took probably 3 or 4 seconds, not 10. But was anybody's bridge similar to my bridge? No, okay, good. Kind of. Anybody else managed to draw a bridge? Yours looks like a ladder. Interesting. I'd like to see, actually, you know, you can actually attach a picture to the chat. So if you do want to send us your pictures, you certainly can. A ladder, like kind of the picture. Okay, good. Not even close. Okay, so we think about the word bridge. Not particularly cultural, right? I mean, there are iconic bridges. If we was to think, we had a bit more time, you could probably think of Tower Bridge in London or the Golden Gate Bridge. But generally, when we think bridge, we don't think of it as being particularly cultural, carrying any cultural messages. But in fact, that is not that true. So I'm giving you two groups of words. In group one, we've got strong, sturdy, towering. And in group two, we've got words like beautiful, elegant, pretty, these types of things. And I want you to choose, which group would you prefer to be in if we're describing our bridge? If you were to describe a bridge to me, what would you choose? Group one or group two? I'll give you a second. Some ones, some twos, a mixture here, which is interesting. Okay, so this keeps mixing back. A psychologist at Stanford, she argued, and this is quite a while ago, this is 10 years ago, she argued that that languages that assign masculine and feminine genders to non-gendered objects, like a bridge, actually affect the qualities speakers assign to those objects. So if you were in camp one, strong, sturdy, towering, long, these types of things, maybe you come from, for example, a Spanish-speaking background. In Spanish, the word for bridge is el puente, and it is a masculine word. So Spanish speakers often assume those qualities to a bridge. I did this with my wife, she's from Colombia, and indeed, she came up with a lot of very masculine words. I also did it with a friend last night who's an Egyptian, so Arabic speaking, which I think is also masculine. And he also came up with things like long and strong. But if you speak to someone who's from German, speaks German, they will quite often associate feminine genders. Now, of course, that's not going to be the same for everybody, but by and large, the words that we've learned in our first language, if the first language is not English, is going to have some influence on the way that you interpret the language that you interact with in the English language classroom as well. So we need to take that into account. I thought that was pretty interesting. And the last one was home. So let's look at my picture of a home. I did this very quickly, not very pretty. Was yours anything like this? Doesn't like to move on very well. Hands up. Anybody have a home like this? That was my picture when my wife came up with the word. Is your picture like this? Yes, yeah, yes, with a triangle roof. Okay, good. 50%. Yeah, almost the same, similar. So interesting that this is a cultural interpretation of a home. Now, I think if you asked anyone from where I live, any of my family members to draw a home, they would probably come up with exactly the same picture that I did. I don't know why. It looks like some kind of classic English cottage, maybe. I don't know. Ironically, I don't live in a home like this anymore, and I haven't done for quite a long time. I live in an apartment block. I'm on the 19th floor, and yet, given that word, I immediately went to this cultural construct of a home. So I'm going to want us to keep this in our mind as we go through the next few slides, because we're going to come back to this in a moment. So I said at the beginning, we want to ask the question, well, what is cultural literacy? We know if we look at the word just literacy, take the cultural part away, a fairly simplistic view of that is the ability to read and write. But I hope as language teachers, we look at literacy in a more holistic interpretation these days. We don't just see literacy as teaching our students the ability to read and write as a skill. We see it as something more. And that's been around probably since the 1990s, this idea of multi-literacies. I'm sure you've heard many of them, digital literacy, emotional literacy, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure you're probably quite aware with many of the different types of literacies that already exist. But what I want to know from you guys is when I say cultural literacy, what does this term mean to you? I'm going to give you a few seconds for this one, because I want you to have a think about it. And maybe in the chat box, give me a definition. What does cultural literacy mean to you? I can enjoy some tea for a second and take a breather.
You can type your answers in the chat box, attendees. Thank you.
Yeah, they might need a second to think of it. And if you haven't come across the term, that's absolutely okay as well. Don't worry too much about it. Good, an awareness on an understanding of a culture, being aware of other nations' cultures, interwoven of belief of language learning. Okay. If we have more time, I would definitely get into a conversation and try and deconstruct that a little bit, I think. Understanding cultural nuances, to know the culture and history or traditions of other people. Cultural literacy is a door to end conflicts between different cultures. Okay, that's interesting. We'll probably touch on that a little bit more. The ability to read, oh, I like this one, read cultural signals and unspoken rules. Knowledge and history about one's own other culture. Okay, good. So, I'm trying to multitask here. In the book that I'm referring to, and the one that I will share with you at the end, cultural literacy, it's a social practice that is inherently dialogic, and this is in the way, so I cannot read the whole thing. Let me get that out the way. No, I'm going to shrink that down. Okay, inherently dialogic and based on learning and gaining knowledge through empathy, tolerance, and inclusive interaction. So I want to relate that to the answers that came through. I think that when we think about cultural literacy traditionally, it has been very much about some of these things that people have said, learning about other cultures, learning how to understand other people's heritage. And we've quite often seen that in the language classroom. I'm sure lots of you have taught different course books from different publishers. And I did before, I've taught probably all of the publishers' course books. And you see things like a day in the life of a child in Japan, or what it's like for these children going to the movies, or whatever it is. And you see little videos and these types of things, introducing our students to different types of culture in the hope that that gives them a broader vision of global citizenship. But actually, I think that there's a limitation in that a little bit. This idea of cultural literacy as being learning about facts and features about either your own culture or other people's culture. And actually that could even lead to cultural stereotyping. So we need to be really careful, I think, about the content that we use with our students. If we think about it from this point of view, it's actually about communication. So not just a page in the book that teaches us about somebody somewhere else, it's actually having some kind of interaction with that person and asking them, is this what it's like for you in reality? And then being able to practice other types of skill, empathy, tolerance, inclusion. So I pulled out some keywords that I think are really important. If we had more time, we would definitely go through these, but things like dialogue, so the ability to be able to communicate, empathy, being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. If you don't actually like, or you don't follow the belief of somebody else, being able to be tolerant and still being able to interact, being able to collaborate, find common ground, find commonalities so that you can actually work with people. So it's an appreciation of diversity, a sense of belonging, a sense of well-being, mindfulness. How do I feel about this? But also when we're talking about empathy, how does somebody else feel? How do you feel about this? And then together, how do we feel about it? And that's part of living together and developing this inclusive mindset. So it's about being able to encounter, communicate, live and learn from other people in tolerant and empathetic and inclusive interactions. Of course, how does that relate to us in the English language classroom? So we're thinking about it as being a process of engaging. I like this idea of engaging with cultures rather than just learning about cultures. That's one aspect to it. The other aspect is this idea of co-creation. This is where we can feed this idea of cultural literacy into the English language classroom. Expression and co-creation. And we're going to look at some of them very, very quickly. Then I would have time. We're probably running out. One of the things we can do at a very simple level is to reflect on our content. So whatever content you're using, whether that's published content, whether you make your own supplementary materials, whether you find some of that stuff on Google, remain conscious of some of the messages that come through. For example, if we're looking at this one, this is actually from a Macmillan tile, an old one that I pulled out, the toy shop. Where are the toys in relation to the people? Are all the boy-related ones on the boy side and the girl-related ones on the girl side? What colors have been used? All of these are cultural messages that come through to students. In the other one, I pulled this one. I typed in home English language worksheet into Google and pulled off one of the first ones. And of course, as you can see, the first one that jumped out at me is this cultural stereotype. The mother is in the kitchen. Now, of course, the person who made it is thinking to themselves, I just want them to practice prepositions and people and places in the house. They're not thinking about that, but actually our content does carry those cultural messages to our students, even if we don't think that they are. But let's get back to the home. The home was an interesting one. Because if we think about the home more holistically, it was interesting to what people have said, oh yeah, something similar to that, maybe a triangle roof. Did anybody draw any people? Did anybody draw any pets? Because these are things that are perhaps closer to our real idea of home. If you had more time, you probably would have drawn and started to think, okay, what types of things mean something to me with home? And we can do this with our students. So at the beginning of a unit on home, which is a very popular unit in English language, we could get them to think of what home really means to them. So yes, that initial picture is great. It sets a great baseline. Okay, you've done this. Okay, let's do a few activities. I rattled this one off in a couple of minutes, just coming up with some very familiar words and then making it into an infographic. Nice and simple. Students could do this quite simply, I'm sure. And they could come up with their own words and put it together. And then you can talk about it, again, bringing that dialogue in and extend what they think home means to them. So we're still looking very inwardly at the moment. As we lead our way through the unit, because we're talking about literacy skills, and literacy can reinforce either some of those stereotypes, but it can also provide a lot of opportunities as well. This comes from a Macmillan title called Global Stage, which has got some fantastic, very cultural stories and literature embedded into the course book. And you can start to see how it starts to help students to think about home in a different way. I won't read it, but you can get very emotive with the language and get students very engaged with the story. My home is warm, my home is dry, my home is safe. So we can have conversations about safety. The thunder goes boom, we can do interactions, we can get them to stand up, we can get them to move. All of these things that stories allow us to do with our students. And again, if we want them to relate it not just to their personal experience, but bring their personal experiences into the classroom, we could talk about other things. For example, my dog, I have a dog, gets very afraid when the fireworks go off. I live in Dubai, and there's fireworks all the time. He gets a bit scared sometimes. So how do I comfort him when he is scared? And again, it helps students to think about from another point of view, building those empathy skills through the medium of a nice, culturally rich and engaging story. And as we bring them towards the end of the unit, again, when I started teaching, we would, do the vocabulary, we would do the grammar, we would do some skills, and at the end, we would check, concept checking. Okay, here's a worksheet. Here's a picture of a house. Can you label it? Did you remember all of the vocabulary items? Or maybe draw your own picture if they were slightly stronger students. But actually, we want students to co-construct. So actually, we could build a mural with all the different types of houses that students create. And again, gives us so much opportunity for conversations around some of those houses are bigger, some of those smaller. Who lives in there? Do different types of people live in there? What do they eat? What do they do? What do they enjoy? Is it the same as us? I've picked out two mediums, which is artwork, because I think that's a really nice way to get students to express themselves, but you could do it with other things. It doesn't always have to be visual. It could be music, it could be dance, it could be theater, it could even be other sensory activities. If you think about home, I'm a little old now, I think about smells, for example, the smell of baking in my mum's kitchen, the smells in the garden, which I miss. My mum grows things like strawberries in the garden. So there's very familiar kinds of scents which come across and again provide us lots of opportunities for conversations with students. And then once we've had all of that, they've co-constructed, they've really explored this idea of what home means to different students, we could take that in all sorts of different projects and directions, thinking about the earth itself as a home, bringing the SDGs and sustainability in, thinking about it from children from the perspective who they don't have a home. Need to be a bit sensitive, perhaps, in conversations that we have, but that might be relevant to students in your classroom, and other students might have questions they want to ask. So again, that's part of the relationship building process in the English language classroom. Or if you want to make it imaginative, get students doing pieces of writing, or you want them to do picture stories, thinking about where their houses were alive, what would they say to us, what would they do, where would they go? And there's a really lovely animation on Google called Home Sweet Home, which you can look up and watch in your own time. All of these, and there's so many ways we can get creative and get students being creative in their expression of language.
Great. Sorry, Nate.
Yes, we come to the end.
Wanted to tell you that we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you.
This is the conclusion slide. So we had to race through. There was quite a bit of content there. We will probably be doing at Macmillan an extension of this, perhaps a workshop, looking at actually some actual physical examples in the classroom, and maybe leading through a unit and looking at how we can extend some of these ideas. Certainly some of those concepts that we were talking about. It would be nice to delve into them a little deeper. But to summarize what we've been talking about, definitely be as conscious as possible of the cultural implications of your content. So keep thinking about it. What cultural implications, what messages, what hidden messages are included in my content that I use now, and collaborate with your colleagues. An important part of this process is to talk to other people. Get people to reflect on your content. If you make something, ask a teacher what they think. And again, we can develop together that way. Look for opportunities within literacy learning. There's so many opportunities: global citizenship education, diversity, equity, and inclusion, well-being. There's a whole host of things that we can bring in, all kinds of global skills that we can include if we extend what it is that we're doing with students. A key aspect of cultural literacy, as mentioned, is dialogue, conversations, open-ended questions, but also collaboration, getting students to make things, co-construct, come up with activities together, and then reflect on them. And again, if we can connect beyond the classroom, so if you can do a project and you can find a teacher doing the same project, maybe in another school in your country or in another country, and you can connect those students so that they can, again, ask better questions. Again, we're developing classroom practice. And I'm a really big fan of exploring a variety of forms of expression, art, music, all those ones that I mentioned before. And I think when it comes to literacy, reading and writing, but extending that, inspire students, be a model for them, show them that you read, that you're interested, show them what you're reading, talk to them about what you read. And that will, again, provide a model for them to become readers themselves. Hopefully we've got a couple of minutes left for questions. While people are writing questions in the chat box, I would like to take 1 minute and introduce the MENA Academy and an activity that we've got going on at the moment. So the MENA Academy is about supporting English language teachers in the Middle East and North Africa. It's called the MENA Academy. You can look us up. We're pretty much on every social media platform, and we have a website as well. And all of our advancing learning and advancing futures activities are hosted within that. It's free to join. You can just go to the website. You can sign up for the newsletter. I send one a month pretty much with all of the activities that we do. So you can keep up to date. You can get involved in anything that we've got going on. Just look us up, menapediacademy.com. And if you find this as the homepage, you're in the right place. If you don't see this, you've probably gone somewhere else. Maybe go back and have a look again. On there, we've got professional development support for teachers. There's like mini MOOCs on there. We're uploading content all the time. We've just launched it, so it's still quite new, but there's lots of things going on that website. One of the things I'm releasing in the summer is the Academy staff room. So I've used the word connection a lot. So one of the things we're really keen on to advance learning in MENA is connecting teachers with each other. So you'll be able to go in, have your perhaps an avatar, and you'll be able to meet other teachers, see what they're interested in, find out perhaps what their challenges are, and you can connect with them. And hopefully that will lead to new conversations. And the last thing I've got to mention is at the moment we're doing our annual piece of action research, which is called MENA Insights. And we've partnered with NILE, which is Norwich Institute for Language Education, for an online professional development course, which is a prize for one of the people who have submitted the thing. So it's just a great prize. The link is there. I will also, you can link up with me and I will put you in touch with that piece of research. But give us your feedback, because that will inform all of the activities that we do over the next academic year. So if you want to know more about cultural literacy, if you want to know more about classroom management, whatever it is that you're interested in, tell us so that we can plan our activities accordingly. I've seen one question there, Lamia.
Yep.
If you're still with me.
I have Yusuf Matar. He says, how has globalization impacted on cultural literacy and hence culture sensitivity?
Ooh, what a huge question. Of course, globalization has impacted on, well, it has impacted on almost all aspects of modern life, I think. But I think that it's also, I don't know, it's really, sometimes we think that everything is becoming the same, but at the same time, sometimes that overshadows the fact that there is a huge amount of diversity. So if you think about somewhere like Dubai, Dubai is a globalized city. And yet when you actually interact with and in Dubai, it's incredibly diverse. So sometimes globalization can overshadow the fact that diversity is there. And if we look at, again, the materials that we use with students, we can worry a bit about that, talking about this cultural sensitivity part. Sometimes it's about having a conversation about it. So this exists, so we can talk about it. Doesn't mean that we have to follow that. It's helping students, I think, to make up their own mind about what they think, how they interpret things, and then guiding them. That's our role, I think, as an educator.
All right. Thank you so much, Nathan. That was really, a great presentation. Thank you so much for your time.